The story of Sage is a family's worst nightmare. No, it's not a script from Hollywood. It's a real-life tragedy to a real-life family here in Virginia. But it's also the story of God's redeeming love. At the Family Foundation, our mission is to bring that love to the government and to families, and to make sure a story like this never happens again. You see, at the age of 2, Sage was adopted by her grandparents. And although she grew up in a loving family, by the time she started 9th grade in a public high school, some of the effects of trauma and mental health issues surfaced. Now, she had done some research about transgenderism online, and she thought if she called herself a boy that she would be more readily accepted. So she told her teacher. Then her counselor asked her if she wanted to identify as a boy with male pronouns. She said yes. So that counselor then told her that they would start calling her by a boy's name, and actually told her to use the boys' bathroom. Now, when she did that, she was threatened and even assaulted.
I never knew any of this. I was entirely kept in the dark by the school staff.
What happened next was unimaginable. The sickening consequence of the school's decision to hide Sage's identity from her parents came to a head. You see, Sage was scared to go back to school because of the threats, and so she ran away with a man she thought was a teenager, but was really a sex predator. Now, he sex trafficked her to Washington, D.C., and then to Maryland. Now, the FBI eventually found her and turned her over to the local government. But rather than sending her back to her parents, an activist lawyer decided to use Sage as a pawn in a precedent-setting transgender rights case. Once again, administrators didn't see Sage as a scared young girl, but as someone to use as a tool for their own agenda. You see, this activist lawyer convinced the judge not to send Sage back to her parents, but to keep her away and send her to the male-only wing of a Baltimore children's home.
Nobody would let me visit her, talk to her, see her, and this whole time Sage had no idea. This attorney, this public defender, told Sage that we didn't want her anymore because she was transgender. And I truly learned the definition of surrender because it was completely 100% out of my control.
But the story gets worse. Sage ran away from that group home and was once again captured by sex traffickers. This time, they took her to Texas. Now, months later, when the U.S. Marshals found her and returned her to Virginia, the state placed her in a residential treatment facility away from her family. And then the staff pushed her into transgenderism, despite her parents and even her own desires.
When Sage was missing, not one person would help me. I called hours and hours of attorneys, and finally, one attorney, Josh Hetzler, stepped up to the plate and helped me get my child.
When I heard Michelle's story and I realized what was happening to Sage, I knew we had to help. I resolved that one way or another, we were going to get Sage back to her parents. Thankfully, by God's grace and a team effort, we were able to do just that.
The rest of the story is Sage was gone 344 days. But she's home, she's safe, God is in the details, and He's working on her testimony.
For years, the Family Foundation envisioned building a law center to fight on behalf of parents and people of faith, both in and out of the courtroom. Michelle and Sage's story, tragic as it is, thankfully had a happy ending, where a child was affirmed in her God-given gender and parental rights prevailed. Now, without our Founding Freedoms Law Center, Sage's life would look entirely different today. But the beauty of us having this law center is that their story goes on. Thanks to our policy and grassroots teams, we were able to help Michelle and Sage take what the enemy intended for evil and turn it into good, impacting families across our Commonwealth and the nation.
Michelle and Sage's story provides a heartbreaking example of the real threats that parents and children face right here in Virginia. It became clear that we needed to do something to prevent this from ever happening again. And that's why we partnered with Delegate Dave LaRock to push forward a bill called Sage's Law. While the bill was able to pass in the House, the left made sure it was killed in the Senate, where Democrats still hold the majority, at least until November.
Our local Speak Up teams have been engaging school boards across Virginia to reverse the damaging impacts of the Northam administration's policies on transgender issues in schools. That's why it's so important that Michelle has stepped up to share her story and raise awareness about the dangers of these radical policies on our children. Our Protect Every Kid initiative is making serious headway, restoring common sense in public schools. And we are thankful for Michelle and other brave individuals who are willing to use their experiences to help change hearts and minds of policymakers at the local and state levels.
We will continue to hold the government accountable with our legal center when they fail kids like Sage. This is a nightmare situation I wouldn't wish on any family, and it's a nightmare we will fight every day to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I would like to thank God for Josh and Victoria, and I thank him for the Family Foundation, because my family can heal and move on now.